Hey, this is Nick the Mining Book Guy. It's the evening of Tuesday, August 15th, 2017, in the US. You can see this presentation is on Apollo Consolidated, which is AOP on the ASX in Australia. Before I get into some important disclosures, I want to immediately point out that on August 2nd, there was very interesting news where it's clear that something potentially very interesting was intersected on the Rebecca project in Australia, and assays will be released within the next few weeks. You can see a core picture here. Part of this presentation is for speculators to help them decide whether now is a good time to buy or whether it's better to wait until after these assays based on all of the other information that I'm going to provide in this presentation and just knowing or me trying to convince you that there's deep value here. And the other aspect is that even if you're a newbie, someone who's just learning about junior mining stocks, you don't have any particular interest in Apollo, I think that a lot of the things I'm going to describe here, you can apply them exactly the same way to other junior stocks. So this is going to be a bit longer of a presentation compared to some of my others, but I really want to make sure that a wide-ranging audience gets something out of this presentation. So I'm going to get back into disclosures real quick. I own quite a few shares of Apollo that I've bought over the last few months. I am completely independent as a private, investor, speculator, and I have no relationship with the company. I've never taken money or shares from Apollo or any other companies. My cost average is roughly between 6.5 and 7 cents Australian, and currently the shares are trading at 9.5. So I'm already, bit in profits, but I also want to make clear that I think it's still good value, that this is a deep value stock. Any errors are mine and mine alone. And always do your own due diligence, do your own research. Be skeptical of everything I say and what others say as well. I just need to get that out there. It's always important to know what you're dealing with. But let's get into some fun stuff now. And this is CEO.ca for those of you from Hot Copper or elsewhere who aren't aware of it. By the way, CEO.ca is my favorite North American-based mining site, and Hot Copper is my favorite one down under. So I'm going to be going back and forth between the two, and I think it's great if there's more cross-pollination between people from around the world who are interested in mining stocks. But specifically here, this is the MBG Trends Room, MBG standing for Mining Book Guy. And anyone's allowed to post here. Anyone can create any rooms at CEO.ca, but I've been very impressed with the amount of activity here and some of the new people who've been posting. At Only Flaws with this message had a really interesting message a few days ago, which I think is very relevant here. I'm going to read the last two sentences. I know at Mining Book Guy, hey, me, loves to be first on a stock, but it's also very lonely to wait that someone else picks up on it. Have you noticed any patterns of the perfect dynamics of a hype play in the making? Well, again, very relevant. I am hoping Apollo fits this to a T. We are not at all at the hype stage, but we're potentially building into it, and very much the rest of this presentation is related. I will be coming back to this very interesting question from At Only Flaws and a few other interesting things. Also, a few days earlier in the MBG Trends Room from at PhotoJ, one guy who's becoming a bigger contributor, which I really like. I'm going to read his whole paragraph here. Yeah, that's the point I was making on MBG Trends a few days ago. The percentage of the total investor universe looking at a nano cap on the ASX seems quite small compared to North American plays. If that Aussie nano cap has world-class potential, which will eventually attract a large North American audience, I see that as potentially more torque or juice if you get into these early. And a response from at JFire, who's my buddy Jay from firefighter.com. Just going to read the first sentence. At PhotoJ, definitely, and there are certain individuals like at Mining Book Guy, hey, me again, who do their best work looking for gems in places and exchanges where the majority of investors are not looking or refuse to look at. And he lists all the different exchanges. And these were great comments. I appreciate Jay's kind comments towards me. I think that more people seem to be catching on to what these guys are talking about, but definitely not the CEO.ca public at large. And on the opposite end, not that many Australians are really open to that many other exchanges either. I responded to both these guys. I'm going to make a note of this because Brock Sallier, who works for Sprott Capital Partners, I think he had one of the best videos or best interviews at the Sprott Symposium a few weeks ago. This video is posted in the YouTube notes below, and everything of interest is posted down there. So make sure you scroll down if you're like to research, go into deep research like I do. Brock was talking about opportunities on the ASX and opportunities on the London Exchange and also in Canada. He specifically mentioned Nova Resources and Artemis. I think that is a perfect example of where you have one company on the ASX, one company in the TSX, and they are multi-baggers within the last few weeks. Super exciting exploration. PhotoJ was specifically talking about AVZ Minerals, which is an exciting exploration lithium play in Congo DRC that clearly more North Americans are getting interested in that. So that's all really exciting, but to put my own stamp on it, I love the little nano caps like PhotoJ was mentioning, where 20 million market cap, if not 10 million in Canadian or Australian dollars, even smaller than US. That's my sweet spot to find those at that stage, and hopefully they get larger. AVZ Minerals at one point was at that stage, but it no longer is, and the same goes for Nova and Artemis. Apollo absolutely is, even smaller in enterprise value. We'll get into that, but that is my sweet spot. You might not be interested in that, but if you are, this video is for you if you want to look for the potential super multi-baggers at the earliest stage before they get hyped up. And again, I'll be coming back to more MBG trends later, but now I'm going to go more into the stuff that's, I would say, most interesting to the newbie type people. I'm going to kind of go through a timeline of how I got interested in Apollo and how this can apply for any other stock, the things you look for. But it always starts with people. And I've mentioned Inverter at Hot Copper in previous videos. He also goes by @Nick at CEO.ca, so two different names for the two different sites. This is his profile page at Hot Copper. I haven't talked to him in a while, but it's incredible how many good ASX companies ideas I've gotten out of him, Apollo being one of them. I have known about Apollo for at least a year and a half now because of Nick. I didn't get interested until much later, but I have to give him a shout out, even though we haven't chatted in a little while. And for the newbies, you should latch on to the people who are the big influencers. They don't have to be the most popular people. In fact, it's better if a lot of people don't know about them, but don't treat all other speculators equally. There's always a small portion, is a power law, the 80-20 rule, or the top 4%, however you want to look at it. You want to find those people, and so I try my best to follow those cream of the crop people, whether they're at Hot Copper or CEO.ca or elsewhere. So shout out for Nick for giving me the idea. But I didn't really start getting interested in Apollo until late last year, and I was the first person to ever make a public comment on it at CEO.ca. You can see late November, they had their best hit ever, 17 meters at over 22 grams per ton. That's a really good hit, especially near surface, and this was for their main Ivory Coast project at the time, the Antoinette Gold Prospect. And I'll show you really quickly the news release. I'll scroll back up. There were a lot of good hits in this news release, and it coincidentally that was kind of the peak of the share price. In fact, I will go back here and make this a little larger. You can find the same chart at a lot of different places. You look at the 3-year chart. Oh yeah, it moved up quite a bit. This is late 2016, and so we're looking at this, and I'm just going to look at some of the cross sections. These are the types of things we can discuss in the MBG Trends Room. I'm going to bring this up multiple times. Again, this is for people who want to treat this as a case study. I think there's a lot of elements here, again, that apply to every other company. But there's a lot of high-grade hits up here in the oxidized zone. The reason one thing you should always be aware of, it's almost always easier to get gold out of the ground when it's closer to surface, just because it's closer, and also because of the metallurgy. It's easier to get oxidized gold. Unfortunately, the biggest negative on the company in the short term is that I believe the metallurgy of the deeper gold is not very good. And you can see that matched when that was released. I believe it was right at the end of the year, beginning of 2017. And it took a big hit and just kind of kept going down from there. And so they've found a lot of gold. The thing is, there should be a lot of value attached to this, but I think the market already overreacted to the downside. So there is definitely interest from having that discovery in the Ivory Coast on the main project at the time. I'll come back to that a little later, but that was how I first got interested. But in terms of getting really interested, we jumped forward to June 6th, and I was still following the company loosely, and then I saw this, and I saw approximately 8.75 million cash. And I did a double take because I was like, really? I think the market cap's not that much further above. And in fact, here it says that was equivalent to 5.5 cents per share cash in Australian. And this was June 6th, and we go back here. In June, I'll go to the 1 year. June, it really was trading for roughly cash. And, that was very intriguing. There was this little asterisk saying, it's pre-tax. And I was wondering, is there a catch here? And that's what got me, within a few weeks of this news release, to call Nick Castleton, the managing director, for the first time. And honestly, it was, I didn't feel I had a reason to call prior to that, but I also felt like I know I had some, various parties give me the impression that management was kind of shaky. And I'm really glad I called, because even though I know this is not considered an A-plus management team, and I still feel, there's definitely some improvements or some things I have uncertainty on. I don't know everyone involved. I can tell you I had a really good impression talking with Nick for the first time on the phone. I think it was an hour conversation. He made it clear, and even to this day, the tax has not been sorted out, but it's going to be anywhere from nothing to about 25% of the Seguela sale to Newcrest. I'll get into that in a second. This is kind of a nitty-gritty point, but this is where, if you're not sure about something, call management up. I've learned so much calling management. So again, that's a super big newbie tip that I always apply, but not enough people call or email management to get straight from, the facts straight from the source. So that was not a big deal here. When it comes down to it, cash for these small micro, nano caps, if they're selling for roughly cash and they've already created value, I mean, you are getting great value here. So I've just described a great, discovery at Bundiali that maybe has some metallurgical issues and tons of cash. And a few months ago, it was selling at cash. This was looking like a great opportunity. I did start buying more heavily after calling Nick Castle and, going into June and into early July. There's a lot more information in here, but I'm going to move forward. Here's a quarterly report. I'm going to come back to this actually, but as a side note, I really like the way the ASX organizes their quarterlies. I think they're much clearer or include more good info than the Canadian ones, even though SADAR is probably the best regulated of SADAR is for Canada, the best regulated of the three exchanges, the ASX, AIM in London, and the TSX v, in Canada, the Canadian one's the best. There are things about the ASX that are better, and this is one of those, in my opinion. But what I want to get into, Seguela. Okay, I have, this again, this is where chatting in MBG trends. If you want to get in nitty gritty, it's going to be the best way to go about it. But I'm trying to pinpoint the reasons I really jumped on the stock. Seguela was a property that is no longer run by Predictive, but they still hold a 1.2% royalty on it, net smelter royalty. And I wouldn't have thought much of this because it takes a while. Usually it takes a while for value to be created and royalties, especially for an earlier exploration play. And so this was something that was kind of floating around. But I would say this is potentially the biggest thing you'll learn in this presentation if you're actually a more advanced person understanding Apollo, but not realizing this is big hidden value. I'm going to look at this. So this news release, and again, all of these news releases are going to be in the notes below at some point after I post this video. So make sure you scroll down a little later. This is Newcrest's exploration projects. Now, this is so key. Newcrest is the Barrick of Australia, and they have tons and tons of exploration. And in fact, most people know them for, or at least exploration, for their investment in Sol Gold, which is a really big, growing, hyped up discovery play in Ecuador. Well, they've got stuff in Ivory Coast, which on this map doesn't look that interesting. But as you scroll down, we're only on page 2. What is all this stuff describing? This is all describing the Seguela project, including all these results. And man, I definitely did a double take when I saw this. These are really nice looking results. And it took me a while, but then I realized if I scrolled to the end, they even had excellent visuals. I mean, just a ton of stuff. Every page you go, you see a different cross-section. The point here is that Newcrest is already treating Seguela as a major #1 priority discovery. Now, I think it's on its way to a multi-million ounce deposit. It's going to take a while. I'm not saying that that's even a sure thing, but what's really, really important here is that this 1.2% royalty, which maybe would have taken a while to develop, you could make an argument that it's immediately material and worth at least a few million. Now, that all this information is important together because this release came out. In fact, I have the date on a different page, July 24th. I already owned a pretty good amount of shares of Apollo, but most people who are interested in Apollo didn't even know that happened. Look at this 3 months chart. July. This is the fun stuff in speculation. July 24th. There was no volume. In fact, it even went down a little bit. I was definitely a lot of this volume right here. Not a huge amount, but there was this window where I already knew there was value from the Antoinette discovery in Ivory Coast, and then I know about this royalty. And so, as a speculator, when you can pick up on those things and the price doesn't react, you're getting even better value. I will make the argument right now, this may have been my greatest steal of the year. I mean, the year's not over yet, but this might be it, because it was selling for basically cash and had all this value already created. We'll get into this spike soon, but those are the windows of opportunity I'm looking for. And so I'm, in hindsight, I'm really happy I jumped on it. But I wish, why didn't I buy even more shares? Well, that's the difficulty of being a speculator. You either buy way too much or way too little. But I got ahead of myself a little bit. I'm going to keep going for a sec. Let's see. Oh, yeah. I almost forgot this. See, I have so many tabs, but again, we can discuss more in MBG trends. This was a really interesting piece of news today. Newcrest to sell $800 million. Well, there was a few other companies, but Newcrest specifically, I wasn't even sure about this until today. I'm scrolling down. Yesterday announced that they are potentially looking to sell Benicro, and I was looking at this. Endeavor and IAMGOLD are smaller companies, and this is kind of interesting. They would be interested because even if there's not that much more exploration potential around Benicro, which I think Newcrest is trying to say, it's more than enough for the mid-tier players, not the senior huge players like Newcrest. But knowing this, when combined with the fact that Newcrest has a huge JV with Randgold to explore in other parts of Ivory Coast, and they have this very interesting Seguela property where Apollo has a royalty on it, but basically Newcrest owns it. Newcrest is going for the big win. This just provides further evidence that Newcrest is definitely interested in Ivory Coast, but they're looking for something really big. So I feel that gives even more potential to Seguela down the road being, who knows, a 3 million plus, if not 5 million plus ounce deposit, maybe with other stuff around it. I mean, that's the goal that Newcrest has. So down the road, it wouldn't surprise me at all if we can start to put a value of 5 million plus or even 10 million plus on the royalty that Apollo has. And as a side note, in MBG trends, I would love for someone to help me evaluate what that royalty is worth right now, because I know there's a lot of other people out there. At Excelsior is a good example. Shout out to him. That really are interested in royalties. Oh, at Fundamental Analysis, another guy who is as well. So I'm just bringing that up. This is something where we can help each other, figure out these valuations, because there's never all that much certainty around them. But Ivory Coast is the main reason I got interested in this play, and it's funny because there's so much interesting stuff going on in Ivory Coast, and Seguela is a big deal, but it's still not a main value driver. It was a main reason that I think it was such a good risk reward when that happened, but the main value driver is related here. Randgold, there's a very nice article related to Randgold where it's about all of their projects, but it mainly focuses on Ivory Coast, Cote d'Ivoire, and Mark Bristow, he always says potentially the most exciting area, and specifically here, most exciting gold prospect. He's talking about Fanandara on their Bundiali permit, and I've shared this at CEO.ca related to some other things, but I'm just going to say really quick. Oh yeah, this has got the makings of getting beyond our required 3 million ounces at reasonable grades. The thing is, every company wants to have organic exploration, and really, this is looking like the best thing that Randgold has going, better than any acquisition opportunities out there. Like, they think that this is going to be economic at $1,000 gold, and is going to be at least 3 million ounces of mineable gold. Well, keep this in mind. And I'm going to look at a few other things. So this is a PowerPoint from Apollo, and this is the key page. In fact, there's two key pages. So this is I'm going to go back to this in a sec, but we are zooming in on this area right here. These are the two main properties that Apollo has. And this little area, Antoinette, that's where those really great drill results were, the 22 meters at 17 plus grams per ton. I think a lot of people would look at this and they wouldn't pick up on everything, but holy cow, what an awesome, totally awesome position. Tongan is the mine that Randgold has in operations, which is a very important mine for them. It's just over here. Fanandara is right here. This is actually an older PowerPoint. This whole area, especially this area, is, I think right here, is where Randgold's main exploration, probably their most exciting exploration in the whole company. And this is a premier company is right here. And look who's right next door. It's it's Apollo. I mean, you can't get a better position as a junior than being right next to the exciting exploration for senior. I don't even know if how many people who actually follow Apollo closely realize how important this is. You could make an argument that these two properties, Bundiali and Corhogo, should be worth multiple millions, even if no work was done. But there's actually been discoveries on each of them, though the far more exciting one is Antoinette. But I really need to emphasize how important this is. Did I have? Yeah, I just wanted to point out as well that see, this is Randgold. Look at all the stuff they have here. This, right in this area is where the Bundiali and Corhogo are for Apollo, and this is the Fanandara. They are really excited about this. You can see they had good results. This is a Randgold PowerPoint. So I'm just going back here and, scrolling up. This is the sweet spot. We're going to talk more about this later. Seguela's right here for Newcrest. So there's a lot of stuff going on in this part of Ivory Coast. Super, super exciting. So I'm just emphasizing why this company should not be trading for cash. It should be trading for way over cash. And it wasn't a few months ago. So, all of that. We're going to go back. Just make clear there's a little over 177 million shares outstanding. This is from an appendix. And there are, 10 million options or so in the money, and then another 12 million that aren't in the money. But this is actually a pretty good share structure for Australian stocks. It's relatively tight. There's not a huge amount of shares traded daily, but definitely the sellers seem exhausted, at least in the short term. And this is the bottom of the quarterly. You'll notice with ASX stocks that quarterlies sometimes are separated with the activities and the cash flows, or sometimes they're all combined. If they're combined, that's why you have to make sure you scroll to the bottom. There's a few key points here. I like the way they organize these statements. Yes, here it is. You always want to look for the little asterisks because there was $855,000 that came in from options that were exercised. Oh yeah, right. And so that's in addition to the 9.2 million cash they had at the end of June. But at the same time, they even show you estimated cash flows for the following year. I love that because I don't think you see that in Canada. I noticed that there was 600,000 here. I actually had a second call with Nick Castleton, the managing director, just a couple days ago, and he made it clear that this 600,000 is related to the minority interest as part of the sale for Seguela. This is not the tax. So there could still be further tax, but the point I'm trying to make is that, by talking to him and looking at this, that 600,000 kind of cancels out that 855,000 that's coming in. That's not included yet. So, after this quarter, they're still going to have close to 9 million in cash, though it might be a little less based on whether those taxes have to be paid, which hasn't been finalized yet. But there's a lot of cash in this company. Now, fully diluted at 9.5 cents, we're talking it's, 18 or 20 million market cap. But with 9 million cash, that means the enterprise value is roughly 10 million. I can't emphasize enough, though, how being a $20 million company with 10 million cash in this environment is far, far better than being a $10 million company with no cash. They have so much cash that they are in such a comfortable position, and they don't need to JV out their properties. I'm sure Randgold would love to do a JV, but they're not looking to. And so that's something to keep in mind. There's a chance for big discoveries where they can still own 100% of the property. Now I'm going back to the beginning of the quarterly, and some of this information is shown up here, but I was just showing you like more the nitty gritty. I just want to briefly say Corhogo is that other property on the southern side, And so one thing I learned from talking to Nick is that Corhogo before was kind of secondary in Ivory Coast. It's competing. These two properties are competing for interest because there were some pretty good drill results. I mean, not amazing, but a couple 12 meters at 2 grams per ton, and also this is where I need help, from geological experts. Very wide, lower grade mineralization. The point is that, after the rainy season in November and December, that's when Ivory Coast drilling can pick up again. This rainy season affects basically almost all projects in West Africa. And what's happened in Corhogo recently is encouraging enough that they want to get right back at it. So there's a bit of a priority to drill more at Corhogo rather than drilling in Antoinette. But the point is they have two very interesting projects. There will be soil sampling results coming soon before the end of the rainy season. So that might help decide the next drilling program. But I'm just emphasizing interesting results on both of these projects. And we're going to hear more about those, towards the end of the year. But what's crazy is that this is so much value, these two projects in Séguéla. And now we're finally getting back to Australia. This is so unique. They have really interesting stuff in Ivory Coast in Africa and in Western Australia And there's no other juniors I'm aware of that, have this hybrid model, and are, especially even if other juniors had it, no one else is working it this well. I mean, this is what makes the company. Somehow they got these awesome properties, and they're very effectively doing exploration programs and making discoveries. And there had already been a discovery at this Rebecca project. And I'm going to scroll down to show it a little bit. Yeah, Bambora is the most interesting. I mean, there's a few other targets here, but Bambora had a 42 meters at 7.75 grams per ton. Really good results. What's really cool here is that even though you have to be careful with, this is kind of a good newbie lesson that I'm learning. Doesn't matter how cool core looks. You never know what the grade is until you get those assays. So, but the point is, this core, and there's a more recent news release I'll get to in a second. There are similarities here to some of the best results they've already had, and so we will see soon whether that's confirmed. But there are signs that this is encouraging. I didn't expect the stock price to jump on this, but that's what happened. It gapped up. And this is really strong. I mean, you can see the volume here, and you can see the trading. It just basically went from that 6 cents to 9.5. So as a speculator, that was a difficult decision for me. I hate averaging up in general. I'm the type of person that likes to average down. But I felt that even with this jump, going from basically 0 or 1 million enterprise value to like 5 million plus, this was still really undervalued. So I made the somewhat difficult decision to buy a lot of shares at closer to 8.5 cents. And I even still have a bid in, just just so you know, full disclosure. But that's just to tell you, like, as a speculator, you get this new information. You got to decide, well, how much does it change the story? And in this case, I felt it was worthy of buying more. So prior to that, my cost average was 6 cents, but now it's much closer to 7 cents. But this is going to be interesting because these are deeper holes where we know that there were, interesting mineralization was intersected, and we're going to get those assays. But we're also going to get RC results, all these blue dots. Well, not all of them at once, but this is, roughly, I think, 600 meters of strike. And so what's fascinating is this was kind of a secondary project. This could be so exciting that it's actually more exciting than what's going on in the Ivory Coast, even though all the stuff I just described to you is super exciting next to Randgold and even the royalty with Séguéla. I mean, I can't believe how much interesting stuff this company has going on. But this is crazy. Tonight, so it's August 16th in Australia, this was a news release that kind of supports what I was just describing. using downhole electromagnetic surveying stuff. Again, I don't fully understand. I'm going to have to get feedback from my broker and some geologists that actually know what they're talking about. But there could be some parallels between great results that have already occurred and these new results. Now, this is something I'm kind of iffy on, trying to show visible gold. And in this case, I think there is a positive here in the sense that there probably are going to be economic intersections, but we will see if again, when the results come out, how great they are. But these are further core that seem to be promising. And here, this might be a new target, but I do like what I'm seeing with these very high gram meters, 50 gram meters with these results. I'm still learning how this works, but what we're hoping is that as this fills out, these two results are going to be purple, and then they're going to do a hole here and then more holes down here, and they're all going to be purple. So I'm just kind of telling you as a speculator, you don't always know everything that's going on, but you start to realize, okay, these visuals, they won't just tell me that there's more interesting stuff going on, but that other, non-technical people will also be able to interpret this, and all of a sudden we're building a real resource. So just for your information, I don't think it's traded shares yet today on this additional news. So that kind of confirms that there's not a huge amount of hype yet, but I do think this is positive from what I've seen, but I will get further feedback soon. On that note, I have to give a shout out to The Snow Keeps Falling. Never talked to this guy or gal, but I love this because I don't see as many newbie type questions. I mean, some Luddite questions. I consider myself a Luddite as well, just so not to put anybody down. This was a question about that first news release on the Rebecca project, and expectations on the assays. And someone I do follow, Eshman. So I've mentioned Eshman in a previous video on Predictive Discovery. I'm going to mention him again later. And, this is a perfect example of someone I follow on Hot Copper, who I think is, top. I'm almost certain, and he could probably confirm this later, that he is or was a former geologist. And, you never want to trust everything you read online. But I read this pretty carefully, and I thought this was a very balanced, very useful response to The Snow Keeps Falling. But to get this type of conversation, you need the newbie type question, and I consider myself a newbie as well, and then you need the expert type person like Eshman to respond. And I will just add that from a layman's point of view, I totally agree with, if we start seeing 5 or 6 gram per ton intersections, this is going to look really good. He actually had a further response today on that newer news release where he's questioning some of the things about expectations. I think that's perfectly fine, but we really don't know what we're going to get. If we see a lot of 5 gram per ton intersections, I'm going to be pretty excited. I think the market's going to like it. If it's significantly below that, the market's probably going to be disappointed. If we start seeing 10 gram per ton, let alone 20 gram, that's going to be very, very exciting. So, you just start to benchmark things and, figure out what really matters to the market, what matters, in terms of really being economic and, for the long run. And that's why these particular news releases are exciting. I also want to make the point that after talking to Nick Castleton, again, the managing director of Apollo, I think it's really important that he said that the geology of, or at least like the form of the rocks for the Rebecca prospect are unlike anything else in the area, because I thought they might be like Breaker Resources, which is another project in the area. But I think he had said that there are perhaps some similarities to the Tropicana mine, which I'm trying to learn more about. It's a very important mine in a different part of Western Australia. And even, some more obscure mine in Zimbabwe. But the fact that it's so different and unique, that could be a very big positive. It's something that no one's seen yet. So that could be a positive, but even though it's different from Breaker Resources, it's important to bring this up. Breaker is very close by, and Breaker is a great model. Like we want Apollo to have the success that Breaker did, because Breaker has been onto a discovery. They have a project also called Bambora, and it's been basically a 10-bagger in the last couple of years. So that's something as a speculator, you're always trying to look for analogs, look for other companies in these areas, and see what they're doing, and you start to see an area play emerging. So that's something I will be watching, and I will be researching Breaker further. This is just their most recent PowerPoint. Now, beyond, there are a lot of other things to discuss, but this video is already getting more on the long side. I just want to mention, though, they have a project called Yindi, which is on strike from Breaker, also in the same area, and I think that geologically it might be more similar. That could be drilled later this year, so that's another potential catalyst. And then they have one called Louisa, which it's barely even shows up on the radar, but I'm glad I talked to Nick about this as well, or Nick Castleton, because he mentioned this company, Buxton Resources, which has an awesome ticker, Bux, B-U-X. I think that's great. Tickers actually are more important than they seem. And there's a project the project that Apollo has is called the Louisa Project in the northern part of Western Australia. And I believe it's adjacent, or at least very close to, this Double Magic project from Buxton, which literally, today had what's potentially a very exciting discovery, kind of in a similar situation to where Rebecca is right now. They got some intersections. So I really haven't researched this, so you have to do your own due diligence, do your own research. But this is kind of a bonus. If you haven't heard of Buxton, this is something to follow, because they're trying to hype this up as possibly like a Sirius Resources type nickel discovery. And if Sirius was a big winner a few years ago. But anyway, the point is, it's just crazy that Apollo has more hidden value. So this may not turn into anything, but if Buxton has a real discovery, all of a sudden Louisa could come to the forefront for Apollo. So again, they've got multiple interesting projects in Australia, which you have to give some value to them, along with the Ivory Coast, which is why I think this is still a deep value situation for Apollo. Now, going back to Ivory Coast, I think this is important just to provide some context for why the Ivory Coast is getting so exciting. So this is Predictive Discovery, and I'm not trying to cross-promote too much, but this is a super important point. I made a similar point in my Predictive Discovery video a few months ago, but I really want to hone in with the visuals right now. So you absolutely should be paying attention right now if you're interested in Ivory Coast. There's a lot of crazy stuff going on in this picture. I love it that Predictive has so much exposure to Ivory Coast, but specifically their Bundiali project up here is of the most interest. They only own 35% of it because their model is to be a prospect generator and to own minority positions. But you can see here, I should scroll down on here. That's what I want you to do. Scrolling down, you can see that they've already outlined a decent amount of mineralization. In some ways, it's comparable to Antoinette. I don't know. I actually can't remember how much metallurgical studies they've done, but it's unclear how big it's going to get. But this is a very interesting discovery. So Predictive's made an interesting discovery in the last couple of years, and then there's this other company, Orca Gold, which at CEO.ca. People are definitely familiar with this if they follow me, but I would guess that very few in Australia are familiar with this company, ORG, on the TSXV in Canada. They haven't been exploring yet in Ivory Coast because they've got some bureaucratic issues. Not recently, but this was the former Redback mining team that did an amazing job selling, multi-billion dollars back in 2010. But at around that time, they had made a discovery on the Mirando license here. And you can see these are some nice looking intersections. So I'm bringing this up because in this area, you have 3 companies, 3 juniors that have all made significant discoveries. And I just think that's wild that so few people are following them. So few people are following Ivory Coast, because these are all in the area where Randgold says is the most interesting area for exploration. And it's also kind of in the area where Seguela is just, there's just a huge discovery made by Newcrest. And so I have to give another shout out to Eshman. This kind of goes together. There's 2 points. I brought this up in my predictive video a few months ago, but it's so important I have to bring it up again. He added this, just really interesting trend line. This was for predictive with the Bundiali prospect, just showing, you think about how the Earth used to be, and I mean, there's so many people, the geologists, I think, realize this, that there are similarities with the Guyana Shield up over here and West Africa, and so many discoveries have been made in this area, mostly in Venezuela and a little bit through here, and a lot throughout the rest of West Africa. But this area, I think, is so prime, and so you can read this on your own time, or pause this and read here. But I think Eshman's totally on top of it, and yes, so we add this element, and wow, I mean, you think Apollo's really they nailed it up here. Orca and Predictive are right here, and then Apollo still has exposure through the royalty to Seguela. Itty is from Endeavor. This is one of their most exciting projects, and then you go down here, and that's where Hummingbird, Eshman mentioned, is here in Liberia. But this whole area is super exciting. In fact, this this whole trend, I think it's the most exciting area for gold in the world. I think Apollo is the most exciting of these 3 Ivory Coast focused companies right now because of their near-term catalysts. But I own a lot of shares in Apollo, in Predictive, and in Orca. They are my big bets on Ivory Coast exposure. They all have their own strengths and weaknesses, but I'm just emphasizing, if you're interested in Ivory Coast, you need to follow all 3 of these companies. All 3 of these companies, and I think it's worth considering getting at least some exposure to all 3, kind of the basket of the 3 that all have made discoveries but have the potential for tier 1 discoveries on the properties they own, and maybe further properties they'll get. By the way, Apollo may get up to 1 or 2 more properties in the northern part of the country. I don't think you should expect it in the short term, but I did ask Nick Castleton about that. So again, they are well entrenched here, and I think that's great that they're able to do that. I think we're going to wrap up pretty soon. I'm just back on the main page. There hasn't been that much activity here. I mean, I'm going to be posting my video, so it'll be here probably within the next 24 hours. But yeah, you can see that the stock price has come. It's moved up quite a bit, but not close to the highs. I guess I just want to add that I think that with what's going on, we're kind of piecing together, like what's actionable for you. So as if you're a speculator, like how do you make a good decision now? Because I'm not an advisor. I mean, this is a stock idea, but I can't tell you what to do. But to think about this, whether you're making a decision or whether you're just interested in how to make a decision, I think it can become very simple. The near-term catalyst is clearly the assays for the Rebecca prospect with the Australian project for Apollo. I guess going back here. Yes. So this is going to come in the next few weeks. It has already been hyped up a bit on this news, but you could easily make the argument that even with a little bit of this hype, a little bit of the increase in the stock price, it's not expensive. It's still cheap. It's not dirt cheap, but it's still cheap. But if they absolutely miss with those results, and they still could be considered mostly a dud, even with those visible gold specs that we've seen. I mean, you just don't know. If that happens, it wouldn't surprise me if the stock price took a hit. But would it take that much of a hit? That's what you got to think about. And there's it could, to me, it's very, very unlikely that this is going to be selling at cash again. But it's at 9.5 cents right now. Who knows? It might run a little further. I mean, you can see here, I don't have real-time quotes, but the bid ask is 9.5 cents. Maybe it'll go back down to like 8 cents or 7 cents. That might be where you're looking for your entry point. If you're hearing about the company for the first time through my video right here. At the same time, it might not come back down that far. It might stick around this area, and maybe you'd still want to buy. But what if they do hit and it does move out, move up quite a bit, moves up to like, I don't know, 12 cents or 15 cents or something. Maybe it's still fine to wait because you want to buy after discovery, and I have no qualms about that. I personally like buying when it's super, super cheap and buying early, and that's what I've done. So I'm just trying to describe those different scenarios. I feel, like if I didn't own any shares right now, I would buy at least a small position, but probably not as large as I currently have. And then I would definitely be monitoring day to day and perhaps trying to buy on weakness. And then, depending on what happens with those results, I buy more. But I would tell you for sure, like if no matter what happens with those Australia results, if it came down to 7 cents, I would absolutely be buying more because I know that the value is backstopped by the cash. I mean, by 9 million Australian cash. Just a huge amount. And all of that Ivory Coast value I already mentioned. And I think that Seguela royalty really comes into play as the price comes down. I hope that makes sense, but this is the good stuff that's worth talking about in the MBG trends room. Like, this is what you have to think about as a speculator, separating the value on these companies, because this is not a simple company. I mean, you can see that this video has gone on pretty long, but I couldn't really shorten it to give you an idea of all the different elements that you have to think about and how this develops. But if you like this type of thinking, you can do a lot of work and get an advantage, because I guarantee you that not very many people have done the analysis on Apollo, let alone many dozens and dozens of other companies that are undervalued right now, that have exploration potential, that fit this nano cap, which I am constantly looking for. If that floats your boat, you need to join up with the MBG Trends Room. So, back to Only Flaws, like we will see if this company, fits the dynamics of a hype play. If they hit with the Australia results, I could see the momentum start to build. And by the way, I think Nick Castleton has a good blend of technical background and marketing skills. He was at the Diggers and Dealers conference in Kalgoorlie a few weeks ago promoting the Australia side, and then next month he will be at Africa Down Under promoting the Ivory Coast side. So that's great because not everybody's out there, but this company is more Australia investor base focused, so it is unusual for non-Australians like me to get into it, but that's where the opportunity comes in. We'll see. If there's a huge discovery, it will pick up in other parts of the world, but I'm not expecting that in the short term. So, just wanted to bring that up as well. And yeah, last thing, I guess, you can do more research. If you go directly to the end of this video, there'll be some links. And I'll have some links in the notes below to some of my previous videos, especially I think Predictive and Orca. Like, if you don't know about them, you should check out some of my videos on those two. But to end this video, I wanted to give a shout out, kind of some fun shout outs to the rest of the MBG Trends crew. And again, you are all welcome to join, but I'm just going to read off a bunch of names of people who have made this such a great room. And I will be happy to talk to people on Hot Copper as well, but this is my main place of, chatting with people. And I just love the energy and how new people keep showing up. And so it's, if you're Australian or, from Kiwi, from New Zealand or whatever, you are more than welcome to join up. There's a bunch right now it's mostly Europeans and North Americans, but shout outs to, in the last couple of days, people who have participated in MBG Trends, at JFire, at Fundamental Analysis, at H Horseman, at PhotoJ, at Kevin S, at Excelsior, at Vaughn, at JJM, at Brendan, at iHostLong, at James Quanis, at OnlyFlaws, at SF Trader, at Matt the Talker. Special shout out to at Adrian Veet, who wrote me a really nice message and just started posting after lurking for a while. And another special shout out to at Alan with only one L, who hasn't posted in a while, but really had some awesome posts the last few months. And another special shout out to at The Next Big Rush and at the Bull Market Move, who've been so great with helping me cross-promote a lot of my material. Okay, way over expected time, but thank you for listening. If you listened the whole way through, all the links are below. Do your own due diligence and join me in the MBG Trends room if you want to discuss Apollo and other nano caps and other fun stocks more. Thanks for listening. Bye.